This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform with all the tools that creatives need to build a website, stand out, and share your passion online. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hypnot Hooray Online, and today I'm really excited to be bringing to you a pattern roundup and inspiration video for Pointelle knits. I think Pointelle has always been a very timeless and popular fabric. For this video, I decided to wear a Pointelle knit. This is a commercial cardigan, but hopefully I'll soon have a hand knit Pointelle piece to wear. I think Pointelle has always been a very popular and timeless fabric, but I am seeing more designers release Pointelle inspired pieces, and so I think it's becoming a little bit more popular and trendy, at least among us knitters. I'm really drawn to it, and I think others are as well, so I'm really excited to be filming this video. For this video, my criteria was very broad. It was basically just designs that I really liked, but I was trying to find some finer gauge, thinner fabrics that had some sort of vertical eyelet or lace motif. So that was kind of the parameters for this video, and I've divided it into different categories. I did want to mention that I do think Pointelle is a little bit difficult to achieve at a hand knitting gauge, just because the size of eyelets and yarn overs that we can create is just, it doesn't really compare to what a machine can do like this. But I still think that we can create really beautiful pieces, but I did want to share that. So that's why one of my criteria for this roundup was for designs that are kind of at a thinner gauge and smaller needle size. So I do have a lot of patterns to share today, and I don't really want to ramble for too long, so I'll just provide the specs and highlights of each of the patterns, and I'll link all of them either down below, or if there's too many, I'll create a Ravelry bundle, which might actually work better because I can add to that bundle, but yeah, they'll all be linked down below in some shape or form. So we can get into the first category, which is scarves and accessories. So the first pattern is the Paloma Pointelle scarf by Studio Annalise. This is, I think, a really beautiful lightweight triangular scarf. It's knit with fingering weight yarn on 3mm needles, and it's knit bottom up, so you start with the point of the scarf and then work upwards with increases. There is a diamond lace motif that's featured across the entire scarf, as well as this really cute and dainty eyelet border, and there are two sizes in the pattern. There's a smaller size, which is more of a bandana size, so I think perfect for plant-based fibers in the summertime for a bandana, or there's a larger shawl size for colder months. Or you could just keep working the increases, I think, until you run out of yarn, so I think the sizing can be really flexible for this piece. The second one is the Holly Bandana by Polish Strict or Suzanne Mueller. This pattern is knit with fingering weight yarn on 3mm needles, and it features a similar gauge and motif to the previous pattern, but a different construction. This one is knit top down, where you start at the top center of the scarf and then you work increases along the sides and at either side of a center stitch. And it has, as I mentioned, a very similar diamond eyelet motif. At the bottom of the scarf where you cast off, there's a stockinette and purl stitch border, and there are two sizes in this pattern as well. The next pattern is the Bloomlet Poncho by Milotte. Hopefully I got the accent on the E correct in my pronunciation, but the poncho is knit with DK or worsted weight yarn. The suggested yarn is Drops Bell or Saniscarn Line on 5mm needles. This poncho has a very simple construction, so you knit a rectangular panel flat, and then you seam one side of that rectangular panel together once you've knit enough of the width to fold the poncho in half, and you leave a little opening at the top for your head to fit through, but that's the construction. It's pretty simple, I would say. I think that this piece would be a really great layering piece for summer, like how the designer is wearing it here with some jean shorts, or you could wear it over a dress for more formal wear. I think it's really beautiful and a relatively quick project as well on 5mm needles. The designer also has a scarf pattern called Milotte scarf with the same motif. It's a tiny tube scarf, which personally isn't my style, but if you really like the motif, you can also check out that design as well. And then the next accessory design is a fingerless glove pattern. It's Whispers of Wheat by Alessia Krau. This is knit with lace weight yarn on 2.5mm needles, and it's knit bottom up in the round. So the fingerless gloves feature this lace motif on both the top of the mitten and the palm of the mitten, and it looks like little wheat grains, hence the name of the mitten pattern. And there's this rib stitch along the sides and the thumb of the mitten too. I would say that this is not your typical Pointelle motif, but it still reminded me of Pointelle because of the delicate stitch pattern that's arranged vertically, and it's a very thin fabric, which I like. I think that these fingerless gloves would work really well for the spring and the fall as a nice layering piece. And the final two patterns that I wanted to share today in this category are socks. So the first is the Augusta lace socks by Quasigerade. There are two different gauge options for this sock pattern, so you can knit these socks either with fingering weight yarn on 2.25mm needles or with DK weight yarn on 3.5mm needles. And the socks are knit cuff down with a heel flap and gusset. The lace motif on these socks is this little clover eyelet lace motif that's bordered by broken rib and twisted rib as well. So I think it would be a really fun and engaging knit, and I do really like the clover eyelet motif. I will mention another design from this designer as well later on in the video in the top section, but she has a number of patterns that are worked with a similar motif. If you're really drawn to this, you can check those out too. And then finally, the last pattern is the Pointelle socks by Skein. So very aptly named. It's knit with fingering weight yarn on 2.5mm needles, and it's knit cuff down with a heel flap and gusset. I would say that the motif on this sock pattern is more intricate than others that I have shared in this category so far. There's a really detailed flower motif that's worked with eyelets, and that motif is bordered by some vertical columns of eyelets. There's also a folded down scalloped hem, which I think adds a really cute and feminine design detail to these socks. Before we move on, I wanted to chat about Squarespace, who's the sponsor of this video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform with everything you need to build a website to showcase your business. Squarespace offers a complete library of professionally designed website templates that you can customize to your exact needs. I'm building a website to host an online shop of knit ornaments and a blog to showcase my favorite yarn, tools, and projects. You don't need any coding experience, as there's drag and drop editing, suggested site styles, colors, and page templates as you continue to build out your site. Squarespace has integrated SEO tools as well, which means that my website will be optimized to include meta, title, and descriptions, as well as automatic sitemaps to improve how often this site appears in search engines. So click the link in my description below to check out all of these features through a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your site, head to squarespace.com/hipknithooray to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code hipknithooray. And moving on to sweaters, the first is the Marielle Blouse by Marielle's Verden. This is knit with lace weight and fingering weight yarn on 4mm needles, and this blouse is knit top down. You first work the back panel and then the front panel, and then you join those together in the round, and then you work the rest of the body down. And then you pick up stitches around the shoulder seam for the sleeves. The blouse features this all over diamond motif that's bordered by these columns of eyelets. I would say it's very similar to the motif of the cardigan that I'm wearing today. Really beautiful, and I can see how the designer was definitely inspired by Pointelle fabric when working up this design. And as for the finishing, there's a 1x1 rib, a pretty short 1x1 rib, I would say, along all the hems and the collar of this blouse. The next pattern is the Nora lace sweater by Caroline Hamre. This is knit with DK weight yarn, so the suggested yarn is either Sandnesgarn Line or Drops Cotton Merino on 3.5mm needles. This pattern is only available in Norwegian, but I thought it was too nice not to share for some inspiration, and can always use Google Translate. So this pattern is knit top down with an all over lace motif. It features a pretty oversized drop shoulder construction where you work the back panel and the front panel separately before joining them in the round and then picking up stitches along that armhole for the sleeves. There are two pattern options for the sleeves. You can either knit a more oversized sleeve or a narrower fit sleeve, but I would say overall the pattern has quite a relaxed fit. And there's this really beautiful picot edge that's worked along all of the hems of the sweater, which I think just add a really nice feminine design detail, very similar to the picot socks that I was mentioning earlier, and a picot edge is always really fun to knit up. The next pattern is the Lilac Blossom Sweater by Kayleigh Noelle. This pattern is knit with fingering weight yarn on 3.5mm needles, and it is knit top down with a drop shoulder fit. And it's a little bit different from Pointelle in that there are various sections of a floral eyelet and textured stitch pattern throughout the sweater that's bordered by some rows of eyelets. So a little bit different from Pointelle that usually features, I would say, one consistent stitch pattern vertically. But I wanted to mention this sweater because I think all of the motifs on this sweater remind me of Pointelle. And also if you do want to knit something that is Pointelle inspired, but you might get bored by one stitch pattern, this could be a really nice and fun sweater to knit. You can experiment with different stitch patterns and it will be pretty engaging and keep your interest because you're always switching to the next one. The next pattern is the Utopia by Elena, Solier, Jansa. This was a pattern that was published in Lina magazine issue 17, but it's also available as an individual download on Ravelry. This is knit with sport weight yarn on 3.75mm needles, and it is a top-down raglan construction where the raglan increases are on either sides of a very small cable along the raglan lines. The sweater has a cropped fit and 3/4 length sleeves, and I personally really like the ease that's featured in the sweater. I like how the Utopia has more positive ease along the body, but a more fitted sleeve. I find that it's really practical and nice for everyday wear, so I would reach for this sweater a lot. This sweater has an eyelet motif that I think is really reminiscent of Pointelle, but it's just along the front and the back, and the sleeves are worked in stockinette. So those were all the sweaters that I had to share in this video, and moving on to cardigans. The first cardigan is the All Day Cardigan by Only You Knit. I featured this cardigan in my fall knitting plans because I really want to knit this cardigan hopefully this season. It's a relatively new release. It was released in August 2025, and it just really inspired this video for me. I thought that the motif was really beautiful and I really liked the finer gauge. So it's knit with sport weight yarn on 3mm needles, and it's knit bottom up. All the pieces are worked separately and flat, and then you seam them together at the end. And there's a 1x1 rib neckband and button band that are added on afterwards. The cardigan is worked in an all-over lace pattern. There's these two narrow eyelet motifs and decreases in the stitch pattern, which create these very subtle columns. It's very similar to the Fern series by Knitting for Olive, if you've seen any of those designs before. I personally like the motif in the All Day Cardigan with the drop shoulder construction. The Fern series has, the design has more of a radiating look because it's a round yoke construction, but I know that this cardigan doesn't have the most sizes, so if you do like this lace motif, I would check out the Fern series by Knitting for Olive. The next cardigan is the Lou Cardigan by Knits Pour Moi. This cardigan is knit with either DK weight yarn or fingering and lace weight yarn on 3.5mm needles, and it's knit top down with a drop shoulder construction. I would say that the motif on this cardigan is more subtle than most of the patterns that I'm sharing today because there aren't any eyelets or yarn overs. The motif is worked with a very subtle purl stitch, so there is this evenly spaced diamond stitch that's worked across all of the cardigan, and like I said, it's just worked with purl stitch, so it's a lot more subtle, but I think if you work this cardigan in a light color, it's still very noticeable and very dainty. There's simple I-cord finishing along the hems and a very thin double knit button band that you work onto the body afterwards. The last cardigan is the Zosia wrap cardigan by Vert and Rose. This cardigan is knit with Aran weight yarn on 4.5mm needles. The suggested yarn is 1 strand of drops brushed alpaca silk. So even though it's classified as Aran weight, I would say it's a very light and lofty yarn because of the brushed alpaca. The Zosia wrap cardigan is a cropped wrap cardigan which features this very dramatic tie section and balloon sleeves. It's knit top down with a drop shoulder construction, and the front, the sleeves, and the waist tie feature all have this very beautiful vertical lace stitch, and the back is just worked in stockinette. I would say that this cardigan looks a little bit challenging, and I've read some I guess complicated parts of the pattern in Ravelry notes, but there are a lot of projects to reference, and I think it's a really beautiful pattern to wear over skirts and dresses. And I have seen in the project pages some knitters make this cardigan for special occasions like a wedding. So I think it's really beautiful, but I will say the caveat that I haven't knit this, but from what I've read in Ravelry notes, it can be a little bit challenging. So those are all of the cardigans, and moving on to the last category, tops. The first one is the Fleur tee by Woolbird Knits. This tee is knit with fingering weight yarn on 2.5mm needles, and the body is worked bottom up and in the round. So you start by casting on the 1x1 rib hem, and then you go into working the eyelet and rib pattern until it's time to split for the front and the back. You continue working that same stitch pattern, but working it flat, and then once you're finished working the front and the back, you seam them together along the top of the shoulder, and then you pick up stitches around the armhole for the sleeves, and those are worked in the round with the same motif, and there's also some short rows for shaping. I would say that this tee has a really beautiful subtle pointelle pattern, and you can really get that delicate stitch pattern because of the very small fine gauge on 2.5mm needles, so really tiny needles. Slow progress for sure, but I think it's really beautiful and it's well worth the effort. I also think that this looks awesome as a tee, but it would look really amazing if you were to extend the sleeves for a closer fitting long sleeve top. The next top is the Augusta lace camisole, the second design by Quasigerade. This is knit with fingering weight yarn on 3mm needles, the same motif as the socks that I mentioned earlier. This camisole is knit top down, so you start by working the 4 triangular pieces for the front and the back, and then you join them all together and work in the round towards the 1x1 twisted rib hem. There are options in this pattern for a thinner I-cord or a thicker double knit strap, so there's 2 options. For me personally, I don't really love the look of V-neck camisoles on myself, so I would modify this camisole to have a higher cut, kind of like an apron neckline, which I think would look really beautiful in this stitch pattern and would be an easy modification to make. So that's one change that I would make to this camisole design, but I really like the motif. The third pattern is the Lily Vest by Ludmila Bebentseva. This is a brand new pattern, I think the newest pattern that I'm mentioning today. It's a vest that's knit with fingering weight yarn on 3mm needles. And this vest has a more subtle design. There's just 2 columns of this lace motif along the front and the back, so not exactly like the all over lace that Pointelle is, but I do really like the look of those eyelets, and it's a little bit different than the other patterns, so I thought still good inspiration for this video. This vest is knit top down, so you work the back panel first, and there's increases for the shaping along the shoulder, and then you pick up stitches to work the 2 front panels before joining the piece together at the underarm, and then you work the rest of the body down flat. There's a 1x1 rib button band that's worked at the same time as the body along the front, and there are 6 buttons for that button band, and the placement of those 6 buttons is also a little bit different, so a fun little twist. And there's a 1x1 rib hem for the neckline, the armholes, and the bottom of the top. The final top is the Vilma top by Gregoria Fibers. This is the only pattern that doesn't really follow the criteria that I was looking for this video. This pattern is knit with Aran weight yarn on 4mm needles, so a little bit of a thicker fabric, but I do really like the eyelet motif on this one, so I wanted to share. This top is knit bottom up and joined together at the shoulders, and there's this all over floral eyelet motif and vertical eyelet columns along the bottom hem and up throughout the body of the vest. There's a 1x1 twisted rib finishing for the armholes, the neckband, as well as the button band. I personally wish there was a lighter gauge version of this top knit with a fingering weight or a sport weight yarn. I think that the gauge would look really beautiful in this motif, but there's just the Aran weight version as of right now. Not to say the designer won't come up with a lighter weight version in the future. So it could work as a summer top. I think maybe is a little bit heavy, but would be great as a vest that you could wear in the transitional season on top of like a turtleneck or a tighter knit top. So those were all of the tops, but I did have 2 honorable mentions. These are unreleased designs, but I still want to mention them because the beauty of YouTube, you could be watching this video in the future and maybe these designs are released at the time that you're watching. So I did want to mention them because I think that they are really beautiful. So the first is the Primrose top by Starcross Knits. This is a design that's in progress. Test knitting hasn't gone out yet, but it's stunning. Tamara really doesn't disappoint with her designs, including this one. I think it looks exactly like Pointelle, which is why I wanted to share it today. The top, from what I could find on Instagram, is knit with 2 strands of knitting for olive merino on 3.75mm needles, and it features this clover floral motif that's worked in purl stitch, and there's decorative edging around all the hems of the top. So hopefully a new design that will be released soon. And the second one is the Fortune Tee by Rita Coach Knitwear. This is a new designer to me, but her design showed up on my Explore page and I thought it was really beautiful. It's in testing, so the pattern is going to be released soon. To me, this motif is very reminiscent of the Whispers of Wheat motif, the fingerless glove pattern that I shared earlier, but even more subtle. It's a tee that's knit bottom up with fingering weight yarn on 3.5mm needles. The suggested yarn for this pattern is Per Fortuna by Lana Grossa. It's a yarn that I've never seen before. It's a cotton polyester blend that kind of looks like eyelash yarn, so very fluffy. So I'm curious to see how this tee is worked up at a different, I guess, material, different type of yarn, but I think that the motif would look beautiful either way. Really stunning. So another honorable mention of another Pointelle inspired knit. So those were all the patterns that I had to mention today. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much if you reached this point of the video. I'm really inspired by Pointelle knits. I hope to cast on the all-day cardigan soon. I'd love to know if there are any other Pointelle knits that I missed. I'm sure there are that you love or that you want to knit as well. Please let me know down below and I'll happily add them to the Ravelry bundle so it can kind of be like a resource, an open catalog of Pointelle knits to continue to add to. So that's all for this video now, and until my next video, I will say goodbye and happy knitting.